Here's a plant that I have a long and very complicated relationship with. Poison ivy, Toxicodendron radicans. And when I was a kid, I used to climb on these big fuzzy vines and play Tarzan, and I'd get poison ivy so bad my face would swell up and I'd just be miserable. And I hated this plant. And I think a lot of people think they do hate this plant. Like, you see it in parks, and we're right on the edge of a playground, by the way. And a lot of times people cut it and try to kill it. But then I heard these stories, I think they came from the Cherokee, that there are plants that are considered protector plants, and poison ivy was considered the chief of the protector plants. And what you end up seeing with poison ivy is, where an area is disturbed, poison ivy is one of the first plants to rush in and kind of protect the ground until the plants get big enough and strong enough to protect themselves. So I started really respecting this plant, and I really hate it when people just kill this plant. I'd rather they taught their kids how to identify it and how to be aware and respect the plant and work with it, move around it. Sherlock, get out of the poison ivy. Because if he picks up the oil, and we pet him, and we might get it. Teresa's not allergic, I am. And the way you tell poison ivy is when it's big. I don't know if you can see in the camera, but there's big vines back there. They're hairy. If anything looks like a hairy vine, until you get really good at it, assume it's poison ivy. Once you get to know your plants a little bit better, you realize that's not always true, because if it looks a little thicker, like little tapeworms, it could be something else like Virginia creeper or crossvine. And the poison ivy always looks like hair, like horse hair growing out of it. The leaves, if you can get close to one of these leaves, let's see a good example. Here's a good one. Let's see, maybe I can find a better one. Here's a better one. Yeah, this is a really good one. So these leaves always come in three. I hate that saying, leaves of three, let it be, but I guess to begin with it might be a good thing to remember. But there's also blackberry and a lot of good leaves that are good to interact with that are leaves of three. But I look for that middle stem that's longer. That's one of the things that separates it from a lot of other three-leaf things. That one middle leaf with the longer middle stem. The other two leaves you can see just kind of join. People will say look for the red dot in the middle. Sometimes that's true. But I guess when you look at other things, it can be one more sign that you've got poison ivy. When it comes out, it's really shiny. Sometimes it's still a little shiny when it gets older, but I wouldn't rely on that. And another cool thing about poison ivy, and I've talked to botanists, and a lot of people that study plants don't agree with me about this, but I've seen it, is that it will camouflage itself to look like other plants. So if there was sassafras trees all around here, when these leaves mature, they would take on some of the characteristics like thickness and size and the edges, whether they're toothed or not, of the sassafras leaves. So this plant will actually camouflage itself to its surroundings. And I think that's part of its warrior protector status. You've got to pay attention. It wants to get the people that are blundering in, that are destructive, that don't belong there and aren't paying attention. So now I really love this plant. And thanks to one of my teachers, Wayne Poole, he got me eating this plant every spring when it first comes out, smaller than this, when you can just identify it. Take one tiny bit of the leaves and eat that once a day until your body tells you you've had enough, which is usually an itchy bump in the mouth, or more often, and everybody I know who has tried this gets the second thing, which is an itchy butt. It goes through your system, comes out your butt, you get an itchy butt. But you build up a tolerance, so if you're really allergic to poison ivy like me, a couple days of having just a little discomfort are better than your face swelling up and your eyes swelling shut for a week once a season. So yeah, is there anything you'd want to say about poison ivy, Teresa?
It can look so many different ways.
Yeah.
But that's why you learn to respect it.
Yeah, and so it's not all about this plant has this name that we've given it and it does this for us. This plant reminds me that the plants are there for purposes that have nothing to do with human people. This plant is protecting tree people, protecting a lot of other life forms, and I'm really thankful for this plant. It reminds me to pay attention. So if I'm foraging, here's some great violets here, right on the edge. I got to be careful. It slows me down. It reminds me not to just pretend like the world is my garden, but the world is there for everybody. And if I'm not paying attention, I might get reprimanded. And that's poison ivy.